Yo, what up, my friends? Going to the Wurmkin Uncommons here. Very swingy, I would say. I would say it's not a horrible pool, the uncommon pool for Wurmkin, because there are so many good ones in there. Well, there's not so many good ones, there's just a pretty good number of great ones, but there's some really bad ones too. So, very, very swingy. This is Wurmkin in a nutshell here. It's like you're either going to find the stuff that just makes the run a breeze, or you're going to not find anything. You're going to find stuff that really has no place in most decks. So you're either going to... There's really no middle ground, I find, once you get to the mid-game here and you're getting uncommons. It's like you either find the amazing cards and your run is easy, or you don't find the cards, and unless your other clan is going to carry you, you're going to have a tough one. But I can't knock it too much. Some of the best cards in the game are at this tier. Two of them in particular you could probably argue for best card in the game. Couldn't disagree there. So, as in Walking Dead, when you first meet Negan, as he says, let's get to it. Ambient Charge. Nope. You suck, brother. The only reason you exist is for the rare infinite that can utilize it. Maybe it's higher for people that are super good with infinites and are just constantly looking for infinites. That I can be convinced of. Unlike some of my D tier choices, which I won't budge on. I'll never say Edge Prior is good. I'll never say Ember Forge is good. You could probably convince me that Ambient Charge maybe is okay, but here's why I don't like it. It costs a ton at Extract 3. I could care less that it costs 0 Ember. It draws 3, but what does it draw 3 of? It just draws 3 cards. Those could be deadweights, those could be units. Unlike any of the other similar cards like gifts, even total recall, you're not really able to guarantee you even get something good. And then it applies consume to them. It doesn't reduce the cost. It doesn't infuse them. It just doesn't do anything that good in a normal run. Like I said, though, that does have that possibility for infinites, but I can't remember the last time outside of a daily challenge that I made that work. And we're ranking these at Covenant 25 here. Like if I did a daily challenge, / Covenant 1 tier list, maybe I will someday. It would look entirely different for everything. But for the record, Covenant 25 play, I just don't think Ambient Charge has a place in 99.9999994% of decks. It's pretty fucking bad. Pretty fucking bad. Speaking of cards that aren't bad, Ancient Resonance. I'd say this is A tier for me. It costs a bit too much to make it S tier, but it's a damn fine card. It's the only real flat AoE, unless you want to count Echo Snare, that the clan has. And it's pretty good at doing that. If it cost 1, I'd probably put it in S tier, but for the record, at 2, you can easily enough get it down to 1 cost. It's often a good target for that. Though I will say, Wurmkin in general has a lot of 0 costs, so you almost don't even end up needing to reduce the Ember on this a lot of the time. You just kind of have 1 or 2 cards that actually are high cost, and it's fine, because literally most of the Wurmkin shit costs 0. It does a lot of damage as long as you have echoes, so it doesn't technically even need an upgrade, but it sure wants one, I would say. The best one is going to be Piercing, of course. If you have Piercing, that already makes it do 10 flat, and then you're getting this by mid to late game, you're usually going to have around at least 4 echoes on a floor when you get this. That's going to be at least 30 damage. Piercing, that kills any backliner in the game, even the purifiers, and goes through, if it's piercing, it's going to go through the spell shield and whatnot. Even if it doesn't have piercing, though, you can always slap just a +10 on. That's fine. 30 +30 works. I do it sometimes. It's not really that necessary. Like I said, if you put a +10 on it, most of the time you're going to end up doing 30 anyway, because 5 times 4 is 20 plus the 10 is 30. So if you can't find piercing, that's rough, but hopefully, half the time you'll have echo breaks, so you can use that to break the spell shield first and then just play it. Kill the unit that you want to kill. Usually a Shadewing, Lightwing, or Spike Channeler. Not much else to say about it. I mean, it's just a really solid flat AoE card. It's one of the better flat AoE cards in the game, I would say. And I'm usually happy to see it, and I'm pretty often taking it. I could even probably still say it's maybe S tier at the 2 cost, I don't know. I will say, though, that Wurmkin's S tier is a little bit different than the other clans' S tiers, because its S tier at the uncommon pool is just ridiculous. Like, the A tier here is probably S tier for a lot of other clans. Staying in the A tier here, we got Broken Memories. I don't know, do I put it ahead or behind Ancient Resonance? They're both kind of A to A plus for me. Broken Memories, I would say, though, is a little less takeable than Ancient Resonance in your just average median run or whatever. Average to median run, whatever that means. And obviously the ceiling's crazy with this card, though. It clearly has a better ceiling than Ancient Resonance. It's a card that can literally be your win condition. It can be the entire game plan of your deck. If you weren't aware, it's probably one of the best spell chains in the game. Broken Memories, what you do is you add spell chain to it, you play it, you bring back the consume card that you care about, and then you play the spell chained version of Broken Memories to bring back the Broken Memories that you just consumed. So you essentially have an infinite Broken Memories that will be there every single turn, along with the consume card that you care about will be back every single turn. That'll also be, a minimum 2 etches on your Flora turn, even more if it's like maybe a card that creates other stuff, but like, 2 etches if they're inspired, or if you have Bog Slime, that's a lot of extra echoes generated, a lot of extra inspires. Like, the sky's the limit with Broken Memories. But even as just a base floor, if it never finds Spell Chain, it could always find Consume Remove if it can't find that. And then maybe Holdover on top of that, if you want to still do that, sort of bring back your card every turn type thing. Because keep in mind, there's a lot of consume cards that if you're bringing them back every turn, it's just game winning. I mean, think of like, if you have like Last Stand coming back every turn, or if you have, I don't know, any card like that really. Even if it's not a super high roll card like that, even just bringing back something like a Wildwood Sap every turn can be a win condition. It won't help you with the waves, but you can, at that point, stack enough regen to survive Relentless, and that can be a Relentless solution, as long as you can, maybe you just have Etch synergy on top of that, and that the Etch is your offensive scaling at that point. There's a lot of possibilities with it. But, we've talked about the ceiling, let's talk a little bit about the floor. It doesn't always make sense to add to a deck. I mean, when I look at it, I'm like, I don't really take it speculatively, because it is kind of a dead weight in a deck that when you immediately add it doesn't make sense, right? If you don't have any, I mean, if you see this, open up your deck, see if you have, like, you'd really want those consumables back. Like, if there's any consumable you want back, then it's probably worth taking. But if there isn't, if it's just like Echo Snares and whatnot, you probably don't want it. Even like, if as well as I like Space Prism, a lot of times I only want it that first turn, and that's all I need it for. I may not even want that back. So really make that decision. If it doesn't make sense, you probably should skip it. It's definitely a skippable card, but often just a very good card. It doesn't make S tier though, because I do think it is often pretty skippable. And I guess we're just remaining in the A tier here. Where do I put this? Here, maybe? Forced Contamination. I mean, you compare this to Ambient Charge, they're both 0 cost, they both extract 3, but what Forced Contamination does for you is just miles better. It's that melee weakness 3 is basically just saying, hey, delete this enemy. It's essentially like a Forgotten Skull at that point. It just costs more, right? Extract 3 is no small task, but I don't know, by mid-late game, it's not too out of the question to be able to pull that off, and it's definitely worth it. Like I said, I can't think of too many decks I have where this just doesn't represent a one-hit kill on whatever you put it on. It also really helps with bosses. I mean, it greatly reduces, as long as the right unit is hitting it. I mean, there is that, right? If the right unit can't hit it, then it doesn't actually represent a unit deletion. So it's not always takeable, I will say that. But often it is just the answer that your deck needs. I think people probably underrate this card. I've never really seen it talked about in a super good light, but to me it was like, if it was a little bit the times it's untakeable, keep it out of the S tier for me, but it's damn near an S tier card in my opinion. Like it answers mini bosses on its own usually. It answers started up tanks, and like I said, it cuts down the turns that you need to survive Relentless for by a pretty great deal, as long as you can get the right hit. And there's even an extra high roll here where if you have a unit with trample and you can hit your trample onto the target that has this 3 melee weakness, it will delete the entire floor. By the way, super good double stack target, stack stone. 6 melee weakness. If 3 didn't do it, 6 definitely will. And also severely knocks down the amount of turns you need to survive Relentless for. You may just one-shot the boss in a lot of cases if you have your unit scaled up enough. So I really like Force Contamination. I don't see it, again, I think people underrate it. It's a pretty good card. You can always be confident that the cards that I say are good are good. You can be less confident in what I say is bad, because it's like, if I use a card a lot and I win with it a lot, that's evidence that it's good. The fact that I don't use a card a lot doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. There's been plenty of cases where I've rated things bad, where I end up changing my mind, so just... I meant to preface each of my tier lists with that, but hopefully it just goes without saying. Now, another card here that is honestly difficult for me to rate. I'm putting it in the C tier, Forgotten Trade. It's technically one of those super high value cards. Like, it's basically just... it's a weird card, though. I think the fact that it consumes makes it weird. If this was just a card I could consistently not have consumed... Like, this isn't a card I really want to bring back with Broken Memories outside of really specific situations. So, like, it probably wouldn't even be Broken Memories, but, like, I have had rare runs where it's like I'm running the full repeater, so I get 2 cards back each turn, and it's just like Forgotten Trade and Shroud Spike, or some other just really good X-Cost card. At that point, you get these gigantic amounts of Ember, and then you just pour the X-Cost in, and it's amazing at that point. But at that point, it's kind of win more. It's like, at that point, you're clearly winning the run, and it's just, like, trying to do the max amount of shit for the lulz, basically, right? Like, you get a flying kill and whatnot. So it's like, is it that much of a difference maker? Often not. I honestly thought about putting it in the D tier. Maybe it is D tier, but I do think it definitely fits the win more category, but it also fits the zero investment category. It's like, well, if it's infused, maybe you just need a good infuse, even if it's consuming. It'll give you Ember that turn, which you might be able to make use of. If it's an incant deck, it fits the incant build pretty nicely. Those are probably two just the kind of mid-roll, like, takeable type situations, even if you're not making use of the actual effect. Then we've already kind of outlined the high roll. Jesus. Dying here. I think Forgotten Trade is cursed. So is this next card. Power of Knowledge. It's a card that I'll admit I might be able to be convinced of. I've heard some arguments that kind of make me think it might be not as bad as I think it is, but again, my experiences, I can only it's hard for me to rate something just theoretically on what other people have explained to me without having experienced it myself, I guess, right? Every time in my experience I get this card, it's just been so bad. I mean, compare it to Ancient Resonance, and you see the, just like, why would I ever want Power of Knowledge? I guess the other argument, though, would be, like, Ancient Resonance is just really good. Even if it doesn't measure up to it, it might be okay. There are a lot of cards like that, right? But I just don't think Power of Knowledge fits that bill. It just, it doesn't do enough to really do anything for me. There's a few of these cards you'll see. There's a lot of these cards that I guess there's maybe an archetype that theoretically exists that I just don't think is consistent, which is basically like etch out your entire deck type thing. So Ambient Charge and Total Recall, to a lesser extent Return Soul, but you basically just apply Consume to everything, and then you have a giant Consume pile. Then I guess Power of Knowledge does a lot of damage at that point, but this clan doesn't have any way to apply spell weakness, so outside of Stygian, how is that going to be good enough, right? Yeah, you can kill units, but how are you going to kill the boss at that point, even if it's doing 100 to 200 damage? I don't know. I just don't think it's that good. Even if you just have a few in the Consume pile, it's like a 2-cost single target. Even Subsuming Blade I don't rate. Well, we haven't gotten to Melting Reanimate yet, but I won't give any spoilers there, but we'll just say I don't like Subsuming Blade as much as I used to, but Subsuming Blade is way better than Power of Knowledge, right? It just, realistically, it's going to do more damage on average, and it pierces, and it costs the same, and it's at the same rarity level, so I don't know, there's no way I can cut it where I think Power of Knowledge really justifies a spot in any of my decks. It's not like Wurmkin hurts for removal either, right? You've got a lot of removal, even at the uncommon tier, at the common tier, even at the well, maybe not the rare tier, but at least at the common and uncommon tier, you got plenty of removal, so a horrible removal card, I just don't really see many realistic situations where I need to add Power of Knowledge to my deck. It's just such a bad card. If it cost 1, it might be worth it. Even then, I would argue it's not as good as just your typical 1-cost removal cards. Like, it's still not better than a Hornbreak, I would say. Maybe it's not even better than a Flash Freeze, in my opinion. I think that Frostbite's more useful than speculative Consume damage, but definitely at 2 costs, I think it's pretty abysmally bad. But, Ambient Charge, at least I can make it do something, whereas Ambient Charge really doesn't. And now we get to a card where I think it's contender for best card in the game, Return Soul. It's everything that Ambient Charge and Total Recall wishes it were. I mean, compare Return Soul to those, and it's just like, how can you not love, like, just night and day, literal night and day, S to D tier. They're the yin and the yang of what these cards are trying to do here. So Return Soul lets you pick any card out of your pile. You get to search through the entire pile, pick exactly what you want, and the discard pile, of course. So, I will say there are rare times where you just have it in your opener, or you redraw and you have it. You can still play a spell out and do it, but it's less useful in those cases. But that's the only knock against it I can give it. Sometimes I won't take it because I'm like worried about thinning my deck out too much. But I'll be honest, I would say it's usually a mistake that I skipped it in those cases. You can totally take it. It really doesn't thin your deck out as much as you'd think. And in most cases, thinning it out is just a bonus. But, Monster Train isn't a game that lasts many turns, right? None of these, even the longest fights don't last that many turns. It's not like Slay the Spire, so this card would be good in Slay the Spire anyway, but because Seek is good, right? And this is better than Seek. This is like Seek, or I guess it's like Hologram. Granted, if you don't play Slay the Spire, there's probably no reference to what I'm talking about, so I'll stop talking about Slay the Spire, but let's just talk about Monster Train here. So, it costs nothing. It's a 0 cost. I will say this, if the devs ever do want to redo another balance patch, I could really see Return Soul getting hit by the nerf bat. Like, it probably gets increased to 1 maybe, or it doesn't decrease the cost of the card drawn, or it doesn't infuse it. One of the two, maybe even, or one of the three, maybe even two of the three. It would still be a good card at that point, but for the record, it does all these things. It costs 0. It makes the card that comes out cost a less, which usually means that 0 costs it in most cases. And it infuses it, and then it adds Consume, which may or may not be a downside, maybe an upside in a lot of cases. But it's really not that much of a downside most of the time. Like I said, the fights don't last that long. Just being able to get the exact card you want and have it essentially be free and infused. If it wasn't infused, you can infuse it. All of these things are just great things to do. It's such a powerful play every time you find Return Soul. It's good. It's even a good holdover target. I've won so many games because of Return Soul. It can be a win con, it can just be a good card in your deck, it can be anything. It's so incredibly rare that it wouldn't be good in a deck. I undertake it, and it's already my second most taken card in the uncommon pool. You can probably guess what the top one is, but I could easily see that this is actually better than the one that I take the most of the time, but I'm taking it more and more. I am finding it's kind of an always take type card. It really is not something that ever needs to be skipped. It's a card that can be scary to take, I guess, but it really isn't as scary as you think it would be. It's really just super takeable and super good. And there's another card that, when the DLC first came out, I definitely underrated it. Revenge of the Damned. I'm putting it in S tier, probably like S- tier. I debated A or S tier. It's definitely not on the level of the other S tier cards, but I also think it's generally better than my A tier listings here. It's similar to Return Soul in that it's really always takeable. There's very rare times I wouldn't want to take it. It's definitely incredible if you have an Inspire deck in particular, but either way, just compare it to Power of Knowledge. This is already just a better card. Like, in the context of just adding a simple +10, it's great. Adding +10 in piercing, it's even better. You can add 30 on it, that's fine. You could even Surge Stone it just for a one-time nice play. It hits twice, so unlike Power of Knowledge, it'll get through Damage Shield. It will get through Damage Shield, and it will get through Spell Shield. And you could just add piercing. It also just gains more from damage upgrades. It also gives you 2 echoes back when it slays. It also costs less Ember. It does technically cost Extract 1, but by this point in the game, there's just no way that Extract 1 is really a downside. It's a very minimal extract. Plus, it could just be infused itself, and then it doesn't actually cost anything, and it just gets you even more Inspires. And then there's also Karuska, which could get you even more Inspires and Echoes. The thing about Revenge of the Damned, it's a great example of how Inspire can actually be a better mechanic than Incant in a lot of situations, because, you know, at a base level, say you slay a unit, say it's not infused and you don't have Karuska, it's still actually gaining you it's gaining you a net +1 echo, but it's also inspiring your units twice, so it's equal to as if you played 2 infused cards. Now, if it's infused itself, it will do 3 in that case. If you have Karuska on top of that, it'll do 4. So you can actually get 4 Inspires in the high roll situation out of a single play of a card there, and also remove, you know, a Lightwing or something. Pretty damn good. Pretty damn good. Inspire decks love it the most, but it'll help in general. It'll help hatch eggs. It'll help remove stuff. It'll help just get echoes onto the floor. Very, very good card. And Soul Cripple, this is one I think I could be convinced is maybe better than I'm giving it credit for. I will say it's certainly good for getting flying kills if you're like going for tournament play and whatnot, or daily challenges. But in your average Covenant 25, I just don't know that it does a whole lot for a 2 cost. Granted, yeah, we talked about Ancient Resonance being a 2 cost isn't so bad, but I feel like Ancient Resonance just does so much more than Soul Cripple. Soul Cripple enters the territory of Power Knowledge for me, where it's like, I just don't love it. It costs so much. The 13 Reap in some decks does a lot of damage, in other decks it doesn't really do that much. I mean, I don't know. For me, a single target 2 cost needs to just do a lot. I don't know that this does, but you know, it is worth noting if you double stack it, if you have a way to return the target, you can do a lot of damage. I mean, it's probably pretty good, especially in like a Spine Chief Reap deck, though I find I usually just wouldn't need it. It's a little bit of overkill in that situation, but maybe it's what you need to kill Relentless on Divinity or something. So I don't think it's D tier. Like I could use it a lot more than I can use Power of Knowledge, but I just find it super underwhelming, and I rarely ever add it to a deck. It's usually like I start with it as my 1 out of 12 offering, and then I might just use it for a bit. It's still kind of a high priority removal target for me, which really it's like C-, the very bottom of C-, I feel, but I think the potential of it to maybe be better than I'm evaluating it makes me want to keep it in the C tier versus the D tier. For the record, though, I've never really had this card do that much for me. It could realistically be D tier, but I think both these C tier cards, it's like it's tough because you can only have so much time to play this game, right, and try different strategies out. I just really haven't leaned into them enough to give them a fair shake, I guess. So it's possible they actually are good. Anyway, so something that I know for sure is good, Soul Crushing Guilt. This one is right there. For me personally, I had really thought maybe this is the best card in the game. I'm still leaning toward Tiresome Climb, but this is right there. 3 Dazed is amazing. The extract cost of 3, I find by this point in the game totally worth it. You know, it's so versatile. This is like, it single-handedly answers Divinity. It single-handedly answers every Relentless fight. It single-handedly can answer... in a way, it adds damage, even though you're removing some echoes. Like, say you couldn't kill a mini-boss, but you got it down a decent amount. This basically represents 3 times, you know, however much your pyre damages, or I guess 2 times, but if you can double stack it, all the better. It's a very good double stack target, similar to Force Contamination. Also a really good intrinsic and a really good permafrost target. So it's one of those cards, you know, you'll hear me talk about it a lot, but it's a low investment because it doesn't need upgrades to shine. But if you have upgrades, the more the merrier. There's so many upgrades that are actually good for it, right? It's not even a horrible holdover target in some cases. You can stack up a few echoes on floors also and just play it before they get to you, and you can really stack days. You can stack days on any flying boss, and there's no way they'll kill you. Single-handedly answers all of those tough Ring 5 and 4 bosses. It's just so good of a card. Dazed is so good in the DLC world. There's no better way to deal with Divinity. No better way to deal with most of the stuff in the game because it just does so much damage, right? Very hard to lose with Soul Crushing Guilt. You need a weak-ass deck, or you must have fucked up if you're losing with it, because it's such a game-winning card. I mean, as I say all this, I'm like, maybe it is better than Tiresome Climb. I don't know. It's really fucking good. The next one is one of the more swingy cards in the game, Soulsiphon. As I put it in B tier, don't think... It averages out to B tier. There's rarely a run where I would say it gave me B tier value. It was either just not takeable or it was S tier for me in that run, or A tier. But that's kind of how Soulsiphon is. It's not rare enough. You know, I'm averaging out because it's not rare enough for it to not work. Because I have a decent take rate with it, and when I take it, it's almost always super impactful. But it just doesn't make sense in a lot of decks. It's kind of funny because I think this card is better than Accelerated Incubation at hatching eggs, oddly enough. Like, that's actually the highest roll situation, in my opinion, is to have it on Consume Remove. Or, Consume Return. I guess you could remove Consume too, but it'd usually be Consume Return. If it was Consume Remove, you would want it on Holdover. And basically, you have your Endless Eggs. you're hatching them floor by floor, and you're always starting the floor probably with no echoes, so you just fill them up. Extra bonus points if you add it, if you have the Mine Horde artifact, which adds a empty extra thing. Then you're getting 5 echoes instead of 4. It's actually really nice with Soulsiphon, even outside of the that endless egg situation. It's not a bad intrinsic target for a lot of these decks. You know, eggs still love that. If it's not an endless egg, you at least just get that initial fill of everything at no cost, because you don't have to Ember Drain your stuff. And then you get to basically hatch your egg turn 1 or 2, probably, if you have that intrinsic Soulsiphon. There are cases too, it's one of those cards similar to Revenge of the Damned, where if you can deal with Ember Draining your units, you can gain an Inspire for every echo gained. So like, say you have a Carver or a Keeper of Echoes, and you just want to inspire a bunch that turn, for every empty echo you had, you'll get an Inspire for each of those. So you can get 4 to 5 echoes out of it. One thing I don't like about it is when it's infused, and you don't gain much from that. It fills them up, and it won't give you an extra echo. The only time it'll give you an extra echo is if you are already filled, and then it will give you an echo. That's not really worth it, though. You wouldn't want to Ember Drain just to get 1 echo, typically. So, but you know, outside of those situations, also it's good for Glug Slider. If you intrinsic it, it's basically the only way, in my opinion, to make Glug Slider worth it. The one win I had with Glug Slider was Soulsiphon intrinsic, so definitely made it a lot more doable. But that's really it. Outside of those scenarios, I don't think Soulsiphon makes sense in a deck, typically. Like, when you draw it late, it's not so great. Though, I guess there's another... I also don't mind it with Reap Chief. With Reap Chief, you can just fill another one of... Because often you want all 3 floors of damage, right? And it's hard to really make echoes on the other floors. Sometimes just putting a Soulsiphon on the top or mid floor is totally worth it, because there's no downside at that point, and you just get all the echoes on that floor, which represents a lot of damage with Reap Chief, so it's not bad there either. You know, you just got to think about it. I would definitely think about if your deck can use Soulsiphon, because it is such a high ceiling card, but obviously has a horrible floor. Then we got Total Recall. It's just bad. It's not as bad as Ambient Charge, because at least it doesn't cost Extract, and at least it doesn't draw dead weights and stuff, but it does specifically draw spells. I would also say there's a little bit of bonus points in that it draws them from your discard pile. You have a much better idea of being able to control your discard pile versus your draw pile. So, you know, you can play stuff in a turn before it to really maximize the chances of getting the card you want back. But, so it definitely is better than Ambient Charge, but it's still horrible. I don't know. I can't think of many runs where this was good. I'll tell you what, I've taken it a lot of times thinking I could make it be good, and then I'm disappointed every time. Just like Ambient Charge. I've given it chances, but I don't know. Like I said, there's maybe some deck archetype that actually uses all of these. I mean, if you look at this D tier that I have here, all of them would work well together, right? Because Power of Knowledge gains from that. Maybe you have I feel like a Shellsmith deck would probably be the best situation here. You just spike up a bunch of defense, and maybe all of that armor is your solution to Relentless, and then you just keep playing Power of Knowledge. Here's the problem, though. How do you not consume Power of Knowledge, then, with these cards, right? It's in danger of getting consumed anyway, so... I don't know. Hard to convince me that this archetype ever is something that you can consistently work. But maybe. Maybe. That's it. That's a Wurmkin. As you can see, it's pretty swingy. Even the only thing I have in the middle isn't really a middle type card. It's still a swingy card, right? The Soulsiphon. It's either S or D. It averages to B, but you know, you either find your S or A tier and you're pretty happy. You find these S and A tiers, you're going to have an easy run, especially the S tier. But if you just keep getting C and D/B where it doesn't make sense, then it's real shitty, because these don't really impact your run that much. They're not really worth adding to a deck, in my opinion, most of the time. So, yeah. Swingy, swingy, swingy is the best way I could describe these. I will say this about the good cards, though. The S and the A tiers. Obviously, you want them infused, but they're good enough, luckily, that the RNG component of the 1 out of 3 card being infused isn't necessary on them. Like, they're totally fine on their own without being infused. So, at least they're always just going to be good if you simply see them, right? You just have to see them come up. So, you know, it averages out to most of the time the uncommon pool is pretty good for Wurmkin, but I tend to remember the low roll runs more. Those are the ones that are going to lose you your win streaks, right? And that in those runs, I just endlessly see these just crap tier cards. I mean, honestly, the C tier, I still say it could easily be D tier here. I mean, let's put it this, yeah, let's actually make this more accurate. I don't think this accurately describes everything. Oop. Well. Delete. So, really, we have a God tier here, and these two are in the God tier. Revenge is S. And really, what we have here is, I've done it before for Umbra, but we have a trash tier. And I think all of these fall into that. And these are probably D tier cards. I'll leave that in B. This is more accurate, I would say. Right? This is what more it looks like. You have a big gap. You have incredible stuff and just incredibly bad stuff. But yeah, hopefully this is helpful. Let me know what you think. I think generally people probably disagree with me most on Wurmkin stuff, so I'm always curious. Like I said, you'll never be able to convince me that stuff I've rated good is bad, because I can win at a high rate with them and pick them a lot. But I'm always willing to hear you out, more so on the bad stuff. If you think it's good, you might be right. You might be right, but let me know either way. As always, thanks for watching, and until next time, peace.